Yep, you're good.
Okay, we're ready when you are. Just to say once again, we start timing you the moment your thank yous end, and if you just acknowledge the mirror, she has a card that starts waving in your face. All right. Thank you.
So I just wanted to start out today. My name is DiNardo. My degree is in brand development, and I wanted to thank you all for coming to watch my presentation today. I wanted to thank Professor McAlpin and his INDS 330 Ways of Knowing class for allowing me to come into class and practice my presentation. Their feedback went into this project. It was very helpful. A huge thank you to both my mentors, who unfortunately couldn't be here, Dr. Dennis Coates and Zachary Seidel. They both really helped me find resources and find my direction through this research process. And probably my biggest thank you goes out to my INDS advisor, Carrie Suter. You were instrumental in the past 3.5 years, and I can't thank you enough. Probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. So thank you. Now, with a show of hands, who has been to an Orioles game before? Hannah, why have you gone?
It was a student night.
All right, so student night, for those of you that don't know, they offer discounts to anyone with a student ID. This goes into the cost of attending a baseball game, which is a major factor in determining why fans attend, which is important when you're trying to figure out how do you market a sports franchise in a competitive market, such as how do the Baltimore Orioles grow their fan base with the Washington Nationals so close? Anyone from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. can decide to go to a Nationals game or an Orioles game. How do we get them to come to Baltimore? So leads to my research goals. How do you increase attendance at Orioles games specifically? And as you can see, attendance has declined in the past couple seasons. So in order to figure out how the Orioles increase their attendance over the Nationals, I'm going to look at the team's histories, the cost of attending a game in each city, and I'm also going to look at the income in both cities to see if that has a factor. And I'm also going to look at something called fan utility. Now, utility is an economics term, which economists define as the usefulness a consumer finds in a product or service. In terms of my research, that's the satisfaction a fan gets from purchasing and attending a game for either the Orioles or the Nationals. Moving on to some of my key concepts. From economics, I use DiNardo's theory of behavioral economics, which he says consumers are predictably irrational. They do not make a logical decision, which says if the Orioles just have the lowest ticket price in baseball, that doesn't mean they're going to have the highest attendance. There are other factors at play. One of which DiNardo talks about is the role emotions play. And in the sports industry, that means that fans don't want to see their team lose. So if there's a chance of them losing, no one wants to go to the Orioles game when they're going to lose to the Yankees. No one wants to see that. So that's a major factor. Moving on to statistics, regression analysis was a major part of my research, both learning how to perform my own regression analysis and also interpret the data of others. On the left, there is a paper from Dr. Coates, Brad Humphreys, and Leah Zhao. They talk about how the outcome of uncertainty, or what is the chance the home team wins, in their paper. I need to be able to determine what the coefficient means, what the p-value means in terms of their thesis, so that I can further my research. And on the right is a result of my regression I ran for the Orioles and Nationals. Moving on to media and communication studies, I talked about ethnography, which is simply the examination of the customs of an individual or a culture. This allows me to determine if Baltimore is a college town. Is it all about art and culture? What goes for Washington? What are they all about? Are they a political town and that's it? Or are they a college town as well? Ethnography also helps me analyze myself in self-ethnography to examine what biases I have going into my research. That way I can make my research as objective as possible. Moving on to marketing, this is one of the second largest part of my project, was determining how I was going about this. I used the concepts of Malcolm McDonald, a professor at Cranfield University in the United Kingdom. He is one of the world leaders in the marketing field, and he has 4 steps in his process. He wants you to define the market, he wants you to develop the value, deliver the value, and then demonstrate the value. Delivered. Now in my project, defining the market was who buys Orioles tickets. How can I segment them into different groups of people? Then it was who out of those segmented groups is the most important. For me, it was the 18 to 30-year-old range. A lot of college students, postgraduates. There are 33 universities within a 30-mile radius of Baltimore, so I felt they were the most valued and should be targeted. In delivering the value, that was simply implementing the marketing plan. That was saying, all right, we're going to put a college night on Tuesday nights to see if that increases attendance. And then Demonstrating the value just goes as evaluate. How well was your process done in that regard? How did the organization benefit? How did the consumers benefit? And then did attendance increase on Tuesdays, which would give you quick feedback on if this marketing initiative was working. My methods started with a literary search, which were kickstarted by a class, Econ 363, Sports Economics and Finance, which I took with Dr. Dennis Coates, who was able to give me some search parameters, as you see here, and also point me in the direction of a few papers that I would be able to use in regards to my research. After I found the direction I wanted to head through my literary search, it was time to identify the data I would need and retrieving that data. So I got fan income from the United States Census Bureau. I got the home winning percentages and average game attendance from MLB.com. And I got something called the Fan Cost Index from Team Marketing Reports, which simply measures the cost of a family of 4 attending a game in each of the cities. I then took all the data and put it into Excel sheets. This way it was easier for me to look at and analyze. And the yellow square on there is just to remind myself of the April 2015 riots and the fact that the Orioles had 3 less home games that season. Moving on to my data analysis, I did some simple things like putting them in graphs and looking at the different trends. On the right, you can see the home winning percentages of the Orioles and Nationals. They intertwine and overlap quite a bit. However, you look on the left at the average game attendance, and starting in about 2010, the Nationals simply had higher attendance no matter what the home winning percentage was, which led me to run regression analysis on what is going on in Washington that makes them attend, as opposed to what's going on in Baltimore to make people attend. What are the differences? How are they the same? After figuring out this and getting all my data analyzed and put together, I was able to move on to writing my marketing plan. And after I wrote my marketing plan, came up with the strategies I wanted to come up with, I was able then to go about writing my paper and letting everyone know, this is how I came up with the strategies I did, this is all the data I used to interpret that, and this is the best way to go about it. Moving on to some scholarships with interdisciplinarity, which allowed me to take a few different approaches. I started with the positivist approach, which Alan Repko defines the positive approach as assuming an independent reality out there can be perceived and measured. For me, the independent reality was attendance at Orioles games. To measure this, I looked at income, fan cost of attending a game, and also the home winning percentage. Using that statistical and economic data that I collected, I was able to come up with all the empirical data I would need. Once I came up with that, I had to use a different approach. So I moved on to use an interpretivist approach to take into account what does this empirical data mean. Just throwing figures at someone doesn't help anyone. So how can I transform this into my marketing plan? What does the data say regarding this? And another thing you have to take into account with the interpretivist approach is the values, expectations, and vocabularies of different areas. So I need to understand what people in Washington view as a cheap ticket price as opposed to what people in Baltimore view as a cheap ticket price, because these factors will influence how you market your team. The integration strategy I used was bridging the explanation action gap. For this, you simply take one or more disciplines to explain a phenomenon, and then use another discipline or disciplines to create a plan of action. For me, I used economics and statistics to come up with that empirical data, as I've said, to explain, all right, these are the factors that influence attendance. I then took that information and said, all right, I'm going to turn this into my marketing plan and say to the Baltimore Orioles executives, here's a plan of action you can take to increase your attendance at Orioles games. Then, moving on to some of my foundational works, it was all about trying to figure out how I was going to come up with this. And I wound up reasoning through analogy and saying, all right, it's going to be like a pyramid. I'm going to start in the 1950s and work my way up on the foundational works that Simon Rottenberg did with all the determinants of demand. Moving on from there, I was able to work it all the way up to Winfrey et al., who talk about proximity and the proximity effect on attendance at different games. And then I was hoping to allow my research to let somebody else build upon in this pyramid idea. And to build upon my research, you can look at the social climate of different baseball cities. As I mentioned before, the April 2015 riots had a negative impact on attendance for the Orioles. In addition to Baltimore and that issue, you can look at, how about Chicago? South side of Chicago where the White Sox play is a less safe area than the north side of Chicago where the Cubs play. So does attendance have an effect on if they feel safe or not? Or is there no correlation between that at all? And I was talking to Orioles executives, they really don't have the ability to promote the safety of an entire city. That's beyond the scope of the organization. So this would be a great way to build upon the research that I have done to look at increasing attendance in a competitive market. Thank you.
Questions from the floor?
So let's say the Caps are the Washington Caps. Could you use the same strategies here to get Marylanders to go see the Caps rather than some other team in Pennsylvania?
I would say the Capitals have a little bit easier of a time because there's a larger distance between the Capitals and other cities. In theory, if you could use the same model I set up with analyzing the data, so if you got the attendance figures and income figures, you would be able to go about it that direction, so it would help. I just think the distance might be a little bit too great to really have an influence on people in Maryland saying, I'm going to go to a Flyers game, drive an hour and a half instead of taking the Metro into DC. Might be a little bit of a discrepancy there.
So, could you argue that, in fact, the Orioles had an artificially inflated attendance because there wasn't another baseball team particularly close? I was thinking immediately about the comparison between football in Washington and Baltimore, and so I wonder if